Today we have some great guest speakers who are here to talk all about energy democracy. But before we get into the conversation, I just want to plug one last event. We're partnering with the MIT Water, Food, and Ag Prize. Their big event is happening Monday night, but during the day, we're welcoming a few guest speakers for a panel conversation all about entrepreneurship, startups in the food and ag space. So if you're interested in joining us, the QR code's up on the screen and up on Sloan Groups. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Peter Heller. He's a 2024 TPP student and is doing research in this area. I'll have him introduce our two guest speakers for today. So Ariel and Jamal, I'll just have you turn on your videos. Awesome, we see you, Ariel. And Jamal, same. So Peter, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you so much. Is my mic on? Can you all hear me in the back? Okay, great. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. Super excited about this conversation today. As Jen mentioned, my name is Peter. I'm a student graduating from the Technology and Policy program this year and do my research in energy justice and energy poverty. So really excited to be invited here today and really excited to be here today with Ariel, who is the Management and Program Analyst at the Solar Energy Technologies Office with the Department of Energy. And Jamal, who's the Director of Implementation Learning and Integration at Rewiring America. So we are super excited to have both of them here with us today. And I'll kick it off with a question to both of them to kind of let themselves introduce themselves and provide their background. So for everyone here in the room, I was wondering if you guys could just define how you see energy equity and justice and how you've interacted with that through your work and what your current work is doing to address that problem. And maybe we'll have Ariel kick it off.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. Oh, I love the camera just turned around so I can see everybody in the room. That's great. Awesome. So I think that's a great opening question, Peter. In terms of my background and how I would define energy justice, I think there's a lot of different ways that folks do tend to define this. I have been working in this space for maybe about almost 10 years now. I started working at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and I've been at the Department of Energy for about 2.5 years at this point. And while I was at ACEEE, that's really when I built out a lot of the work that I was doing on the topic of energy equity and justice initially. While there, I helped to conduct a few different energy burden studies, which is one way of measuring energy equity and justice, as well as supporting some broader work to think about how to better define energy justice and equity within the energy efficiency space at that time. In terms of how I tend to define it, I typically think about energy equity as centering the policies and programs that are informed by community input and community driven, and that are designed in a way that meet all of the needs of individuals, thinking about both the past, present, and future needs that folks have, and conducted in a way that are going to make sure that the outcomes of those policies and programs are not deepening inequities, but instead helping to alleviate past inequities that are already in the system. While I was at ACEEE, I helped to put together some kind of like defining images of what energy equity looks like. I could share my screen, but I'll also just drop this in the chat. I know a lot of people are in the room though. And how we typically spoke about it, we defined it into 4 different categories. Some other folks use different categories, but we looked at energy equity as a structural issue, a procedural issue, a distributional issue, and a transgenerational issue. So as a structural issue, this means looking at Susan programs, cultural and the institutional dynamics that led to the inequities that we currently are experiencing within the energy sector. I just got a note, my internet is unstable. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, you're back good.
Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great, sorry. Procedural is thinking about how do we make sure that equitable, distributional is thinking about how the outcomes of those policies are being equitably distributed so that folks are receiving what they need from the policies and addressing those past harms, and then also transgenerational, thinking about the future. Jamal may want to talk more about the Energy Equity Project and how those definitions may differ some. But I think, I think we'll get more into this in the conversation, but really thinking about different ways of addressing energy inequity, thinking about energy inequity. There are so many different expansive ways that folks are looking at this, and it's a really exciting field to be working in and to continue seeing grow over the next decades and years. I'll pass it to you, Jamal.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm Jamal. I work with Rewiring America. I agree with a lot of what Ariel said in terms of defining energy equity. I think I would just add some additional context to sort of frame the issue. A lot of what energy equity and a lot of the circumstances that cause energy equity. So for example, if there are certain terms that are used to determine whether someone is negatively impacted by energy. So energy burden, which is a term that I think was popularized by Ariel in a lot of Ariel's research. Energy insecurity, which is a term that refers to the inability for households to meet their basic energy needs. These are some of the, I think the two most common terms that are used to define and measure one's experience around equity. Around energy equity. And folks who have a high energy burden, so who pay a disproportionate amount of their income on energy, and folks who are energy insecure, meaning that they're unable to meet their basic energy needs. A lot of the circumstances that lead to those outcomes have nothing to do with energy at all. They have a lot to do with where people live. They have a lot to do with the quality and the conditions of one's home that lead to really inefficient ways of delivering energy. It has to do with income. So, if one's income is really, isn't as high, then the percentage they're spending on energy might be higher, even if the amount of that they're spending might be the same as someone else with a higher income. So energy equity, I would also add to what Ariel said as being is addressing some of these addressing some of these like substantive and structural issues in our society that lead to energy inequities. And that has manifested in my work. I used to work for an organization called Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. And what we did there was advance policies and programs that addressed or aim to improve the quality of the existing housing stock. So we did a lot of things like design and implement lead poisoning prevention programs, energy efficiency programs, other home repair programs, and trying to braid and stack all of these different incentives so that someone who might be energy insecure or have high energy burden can have their home upgraded to be more energy efficient, thereby reducing their energy consumption and reducing their energy bills, and thereby promoting energy equity in the process. So I worked a lot on, again, policies. So what does it look like to have a policy that is that requires buildings and homes to improve their energy efficiency over time? What does it look like to provide more funding for these types of initiatives and programs? And then designing programs. Ariel had mentioned procedural justice. That is the act of making sure that the populations of people that a program or policy is intended to serve are involved in the decision making. I think what we found, the proverbial we, which I think includes Ariel and myself, has found is a lot of the energy efficiency policies and programs that existed over time weren't designed with the people who they were designed to serve involved in it, which means that while these programs and policies existed, they weren't that effective. And so I feel like a lot of what has happened over the last several years has been a rethinking of these policies and programs and sort of redesigning them to be more effective. So that is a little bit about the work that I've done and how I view energy equity. And I will stop there because I know there's a lot more for us to cover.
Yeah, I think that's a great opening. So thank you both so much for that context. I think we've discussed energy burden and energy insecurity. So there's a lot of definitions out there when it comes to energy justice, and we talk a lot about more quantitative measures of energy poverty or energy burden, where it's the percent of income spent on the percent of your household income spent on your energy services. Or there's some surveys where people say that they've not been able to meet their individual energy needs, or they've kept their home at unhealthy temperatures. So I was wondering, based on both of your work, when you're looking at procedural policies or design of policies, how should we be looking at, like, where do we get the data to say, who should we be targeting? How should we be finding out where we need to spend resources? And how do we do that at a national level where, it's not possible to interview every household across the US? How can we kind of make generalizable models for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think as a field, I don't know that we have a consensus on that. And I think that's good. I think so much of energy inequity is localized. So having a consensus, I think, would by definition mean that there isn't room for more localized solutions. But energy burden and energy security, I think, are two of the primary ways of measuring. And Ariel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for the first time, I think was 2019 and 2020, there was a national survey of energy insecurity.
Yeah, I was going to flag that. The Residential Energy Consumption Survey, the REC survey, comes out like every 5 years or so, and they included a bunch of energy insecurity questions in their 2020 edition, which was the last one.
Yeah, and that, I don't know that we actually even talked about the dimensions of energy insecurity. So energy insecurity, and then we'll get into the data question that you asked, Peter.
Great.
Energy insecurity refers to, like, there are three dimensions of that. One is energy burden. So energy burden is included in the concept of energy insecurity. The other has to do with more structural issues that lead someone to be energy insecure. So there's the percentage of income that one pays, which refers to energy burden, but then there's the quality of the home that might manifest in terms of, like, not having a working heating system, or not having AC at all, which means, like, even if they are able to afford it, the machines in their homes are not working, so they're still unable to meet their needs. And then there's a behavioral component to this, where because of one's limited income, needing to make trade-offs on what you decide to prioritize. So let's say someone, a random person might have I don't know, $500 of this to spend on one of a few things: their utilities, their rent, food, medication. They might choose to invest that 500 in any of those buckets, and may not choose to invest in their energy bills. So that person is also unable to meet their energy needs. But it's not because they can't afford it, it's because they're choosing to not invest in that. So there's all types of circumstances that people deal with, and the best way to measure whether someone's energy insecure is through a combination of quantitative and qualitative metrics. And I think that's how the REC survey determined energy insecurity, was doing a survey of households across the country. Now we're trying to embed some of that, the concept of energy insecurity, into many other energy efficiency programs that exist. So the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is a federal program that is run out of the Department of Energy, where Ariel is, that program is based on energy burden and does not account for some of these other dimensions of energy insecurity. The same is true for a lot of the utility energy efficiency programs that exist out there. So a lot of the work that I know Ariel did previously and that I'm still doing now is trying to get programs to account for some of these other dimensions, which means doing more surveying of their customers, doing more surveys of their participants to see how their programs are impacting one's ability to meet their energy needs. So I'll stop there and kick it to Ariel for more thoughts.
Yeah, that was great, Jamal. Yeah, I agree with everything that Jamal said. I think measuring energy equity and energy insecurity can be done in so many different ways. I feel like right now, policymakers and industry typically has been really coalescing around energy burden as a way to measure this, which your energy burden is the percentage of your household income that you spend on energy annually. Typically that's defined as both like your electric bills and your heating bills. And from the research that I've done in the past at ACEEE, the average energy burden nationally is about 3% for households, and the average energy burden for households with lower income is more like 7 or 8%. And then we also found that there were major inequities in terms of higher energy burdens for folks who are renters, for folks who identified as communities of color, for folks living in multifamily buildings. So there's all of these other factors, which Jamal had highlighted as well, that are more structural that impact this too. So for your energy burden to be high, there's like a couple of factors there. One is that your income is low, which is a major structural factor kind of outside of the energy sector. How much energy you're using in your home is another factor, which Jamal was highlighting in terms of, if you live in a really old building or, have really inefficient heating or cooling systems, that's going to cause you to use more energy than you need to be using. And then that'll lead to a higher bill. And then the cost of your energy, right? And like how you're getting that provided to you, that can also impact that piece. I currently work at the Department of Energy in the solar office, specifically working on community solar and ways to make solar more affordable and accessible to households nationally. And right now, solar is one of the lowest cost energy resources, as is energy efficiency. So both of those together can really help reduce energy burden for folks. I do agree with Jamal, though, that personally, I think that qualitative data is especially important when measuring energy insecurity, because an energy burden is just a number and it doesn't actually tell you the experience that a household is having. You could have two households that spend 10% of their income on their energy bills, and maybe for one household they can afford that, and for another household they really can't. So I think all of those qualitative pieces are super important. The REC survey is one way that's been collected at the national level. And they included metrics in there asking households if they had foregone buying food or medicine in order to pay an energy bill, if they left their home at an unhealthy temperature, if they'd received a disconnect notice, and if they were unable to use their heating or cooling equipment. Because as Jamal had highlighted, those are all factors too that influence somebody's health and well-being and their experience having access to and using energy that you can't measure in like one number. So I really think to, understand the issue and where resources need to go, we need to be looking at a lot of different data sources. I think the federal government and other state governments and such have been trying to do this in more dynamic ways, such as I think the White House came out with a climate and economic justice screening tool not too long ago, which is a way to identify specific communities that the federal government has identified as disadvantaged communities, is how they've named those. And that map uses a number of factors. So looking at, climate change, health, housing, pollution, transportation, workforce development, and energy costs. So really trying to look a bit more dynamically at different metrics. But I do agree that the qualitative data is really important and hard to come by in some ways. I'll also just flag, I think part of this question was, what are some of the challenges to getting this data or the roadblocks? I would say a lot of this kind of data is just not being collected typically, and or we don't have access to. I think there's a lot of data that maybe utilities have that is not made public, such as, you know, how many folks have arrears on their bills, so they owe money to the utility for their energy bills, if they've experienced shutoffs. That's data that typically utilities don't make public. And some of these things could be made public through policy, you know, decisions or requirements, and or states could decide that certain data is valuable to collect in order to understand what energy security looks like across the state. There are examples of some states doing this, and there's a long way to go, I think, for us to collect the information that we need to really measure this.
Yeah, yeah, you both brought up great points there. I think specifically with the REC survey that you both brought up, recently was doing some analysis on that and saw that, you know, they report out that 1 in 3 households report experiencing energy insecurity in the US. But when we looked at the energy burden from that survey, the Venn diagram of households that reported experiencing energy insecurity and those that by the burden number would have been classified as such, the overlap was not as big as we would hoped. I think it was only about like 40% of an overlap from the 2020 data. So it's really important to get both of these factors. So I think shifting into a little bit more of, you know, as we are seeing, you know, climate change worsen, we're seeing more impacts. Like, for example, last year in Arizona, there was 24 consecutive days of 110 degrees Fahrenheit or above. You know, this is no longer this is a problem that is acute that we need to think about. It's really something that, and we're so glad we have 2 people and so many more working so hard on it. But wondering about solution pathways that you've been looking at, specifically like through your programs. So like, I know Ariel, you mentioned the community solar programs. Jamal, you work a lot with electrification. So whether it's related to your work, are there solution pathways that you've seen through your work that you think are effective in addressing some of these problems we've talked about?
Yeah, do you want to start, Jamal? Or
Sure, I
okay,
can.
go ahead.
So the concept of electrification, which is the process of replacing a fossil fuel machine with a efficient electric version of that same machine, I think is one way of addressing energy insecurity and also energy burden. You know, for those, I imagine many of you in the room are familiar with the term, but if not, it really is just the practice of, let's say you have a gas powered car and you then replace that with a electric vehicle, like you've just electrified. If you replace a furnace with a energy efficient electric heat pump, you have also just electrified. So there are different ways to do that, to electrify. And the conversation around electrification and what I think has one of the reasons why Rewiring America has become tapped into or like hit a nerve, I guess, in the industry is because electrification represents an opportunity for households to take part in addressing climate change. For so long, the disposition or the discourse around addressing climate change has been, we need to mobilize to like shut down power plants, or we need to mobilize to like stop oil drilling. And, you know, all of that is important, but can be really overwhelming when thinking about me as an individual, like how am I gonna stop oil drilling? And it's really hard to do. But we can address climate change. And in fact, one of our founders did a study that found that about half of our energy-related emissions comes from decisions that consumers make. So decisions in terms of the types of cars that we drive, how we heat and cool our homes, how we cook our food, how we dry our clothes. All of these are decisions that a lot of consumers make. And if everyone in the country electrified those machines, we would be addressing over half of our, or almost half of our energy related emissions. So that gives a sense of agency to addressing the climate crisis. The types of machines that we're talking about, electric vehicles, heat pumps, induction stoves, electric dryers, are are all more efficient versions of those machines than fossil fuel ones. If you take a heat pump, for example, a heat pump can be 2 to 3 times as efficient as a furnace. So that means for the same output of heat, you're putting in 2 to 3 times, or two to, like, not getting my math right. You're putting in way less energy in order to get that same amount of output in terms of heat, which means, like, if you're spending less energy to produce the same amount of heat, your bill should be lower because you're not paying for as much. You're not consuming as much and you're not paying for as much. So upgrading to more efficient appliances is one way of reducing energy burden and is one way of promoting energy security. Electrification also gets at indoor air pollution. So if we're talking about the experience of producing or the experience of completing basic tasks in the home, like cooking, like heating your home, cooling your home, indoor air pollution is not a good thing. And studies have shown that indoor air pollution actually can contribute to respiratory illnesses like asthma, COPD, etc. And so even if one is able to meet their energy needs with a fossil fuel machine, they might be suffering in other ways through their health. So electrification also captures the reduction of indoor air pollution, the improvement of energy efficiency, and improvement of resilience. When you have more electric appliances in one home, you're able to cover a lot more of your bill using renewable energy sources, such as the programs that Ariel oversees. So electrification is a key part of this discussion around advancing energy equity and energy security. But the challenge is, how do we, oftentimes these more efficient and more effective machines are more expensive and are more inaccessible. So how do we make sure that there are ways that energy burdened communities and households can actually access and upgrade their technologies, which then unlocks all of these various benefits that come with it. So that is critical to the work that we're doing at Rewiring America. And I can talk more about that, but I would want to kick it over to Ariel to give some thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. Speaking from the federal government perspective, I think, the current administration, the Biden administration, really values energy equity and justice. There's currently a program called the Justice 40 Initiative that's aiming to make sure that through government expenditures and investments, at least 40% of those benefits from those energy investments are going to households that are in those defined disadvantaged communities. So, I think we're at a really exciting time in history, actually, and, really excited for many of you who are, graduating soon and joining the workforce, because we have some major federal programs that have just been launched that are really aiming to try to fill this gap between, as we're moving towards a clean energy transition, making sure we're not leaving anybody behind as we're doing that. So, two programs that I'll flag here, one of which, Jamal, I think you're working on much more than I am, is from the Inflation Reduction Act, there's the home energy rebates program, the home electrification and appliance rebates. So that's, I think, $8.8 billion that's being invested at the state level to help folks be able to electrify their appliances, make their homes more efficient. And there are special provisions within that for folks who are income qualified to be able to receive certain rebates and benefits. And then I am working more closely on another program from the Inflation Reduction Act called the Solar for All program, which is $7 billion recently awarded to states and other entities to expand low-income rooftop solar and community solar access. So I think there's these major efforts, a lot of investment going in right now to try to address some of those inequities as we're moving towards this clean energy transition. And I'll just, flag for everyone in the room that there's so much space and so much need for folks to help, make sure that these are implemented well, equitably, et cetera, as they're rolling out at the federal, state, and implementation levels. I'll talk a little bit more about the work that I'm doing in the solar office as well. So for folks who aren't familiar with the concept of community solar is a type of solar where a solar installation can be created off-site. So you don't have to have solar panels on your home, but you can basically subscribe to a portion of the generation that's being generated from that solar system. So you could have a whole neighborhood or a community that's able to subscribe to the system that's, off, adjacent to the community. And you're basically purchasing the energy for the cost of, what it's being produced as renewable energy. Typically, we're seeing this as saving folks about 10 to 20% on their energy bills by subscribing to solar. And through the Solar for All program, there's a goal to achieve a 20% savings on the bill for all households participating in these new community solar and rooftop solar programs that are rolling out. Some of the other work that I'm doing in the solar office is just working to make sure that solar is more equitable and accessible by all households. So I'll just flag one project we're working on right now we're calling Equitable Solar Communities of Practice, where we found 6 organizations that have experience working with communities on the ground, working on equitable solar in a number of areas. And they're going to be holding some community convenings and doing some research to identify how we can scale these benefits more in the solar sector. So this is looking across consumer protections for solar, household savings. So how do we maximize the savings that folks are receiving from solar, either rooftop or community solar? Looking at that grid resilience, which Jamal had highlighted as well. So how can solar help to create microgrids or, make sure that folks have access to energy if there's a disruption. Also really focused on that community-led economic development piece. So for solar, we're at the federal government right now, we're really excited about the ability to have community-owned solar systems as well, which is really leaning into that energy democracy piece of how do we make sure that decisions about energy are being led by the community, and those benefits are really going to the end users and the community members. So we're looking into how can we scale and have more, solar systems that are owned by the community that benefit the community, and really trying to make sure that every solar system developed is providing benefits to the community in some way. So that's a big focus of what we're looking at, as well as the workforce development pieces, and making sure that as we're investing all of this money in the clean energy sector, that we're also able to make, good paying jobs, career pathways for folks working both in, energy efficiency, solar, wind, et cetera, to make these great careers for folks moving forward. So we're doing really exciting work. There's going to be so much work happening over the next few years as we're rolling out these programs. And this is just a really great, exciting field to be in.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I think I've got time for about one more question for both of you, and then I'll open it up to audience questions. But so I think one of the things that, we're sitting here in a room full of MIT students, a lot of students going into business, sustainability, engineering. If you could wave a magic wand and mobilize a group of MIT students to fill, one gap that you see in the energy equity space, is whether it relates to solar installations or the issues we deal with renters versus homeowners and such. If you could think of one gap in the energy equity space that you see could be that could be mobilized and advanced, and advice for students to get involved in that. Sorry, kind of a big question to end with, but.
Yeah, I'll say the first thing that comes to mind for me, I think right now is an exciting time in the solar sector to really be building out financial models for how folks can build and scale these solar systems, especially with these equitable benefits included. So something we're also doing in the solar office is we have a program called the Community Power Accelerator Program, where we're working with smaller mission-driven solar developers to help them be able to create projects that do incorporate all of those benefits I mentioned before. So, thinking about the bill savings, the resilience, the workforce, the community led pieces. And there's definitely, you know, a lot of work that can be done in this space to think about how can we maximize benefits from solar development, and how do we create models that can effectively implement the Solar for All program and these other programs that are coming out. And, you know, I think there's a lot of creative thinking that can be done around, you know, right now, I think a lot of benefits from clean energy programs tend to go to the, you know, companies that are like developing products and not necessarily trickling down to the end users and the households that we're trying to reach. So I think that's a big area that folks can work on. I'm going to pass it to you, Jamal, and I'll keep thinking about other examples as you share.
Yeah, that is a big question. I like the idea around financial models. I also think it's worth maybe putting all of this into context. That the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, is providing billions of dollars of investment, but the vast majority of that is through tax credits. And so understanding and communicating how to access tax credits and how to like maximize the proverbial us maximizing the Inflation Reduction Act means maximizing the uptake of tax credits. And so I think like as a bucket of things to work on, like how are we understanding how to maximize tax credits? How are we communicating the importance of tax credits to people who may not view tax credits as beneficial to them? We're talking about folks who are probably energy burdened, are probably experiencing energy insecurity. So I think that's a big area. Also, you know, Peter, you mentioned renters and split, or you mentioned the split incentive, which is present in full force for renters. Developing more solutions for renters, and that can include policy solutions for renters. It can also include like technological solutions for renters. We are on the cusp of the window unit heat pump, which is a heat pump that can just be plugged into the wall and hung outside of your one's window, that can provide more efficient heating and cooling. But those types of solutions, I think, are going to be really helpful for us to address the split incentives. People have been talking about the split incentives for decades, and there hasn't been a good way of addressing it. I think now that we have new technological solutions, I think we're opening up more pathways to address it. But that's still a big issue that we can't say that we're going to be equitably advancing the energy transition without addressing the split incentive issue. So all of you in the room, well, I can't really see you, but yeah, you should. I want you all to work on that.
Yeah. One thing I would add, Jamal, that you just made me think of with what you were saying in terms of, I think there's also like a short-term and a long-term strategy that we need for this. Like, as Jamal was saying, the short term, we need to make sure that folks can access these tax credits, can access all of these resources that are being, pumped into the economy right now. And I think we need to think about, these programs are all temporary programs. They're meant to last for a few years. And, something we're thinking about at the federal level is like how we want these programs to really be transformational in the market to change in the long term, right? Like how, the technologies, the affordability, as Jamal said, like window heat pumps are just about, becoming something that are affordable and included in programs. And same with solar. Like we want to transform the solar market so that, the Solar for All program is only, I think, a 3-year-long program that is aiming to provide 20% bill credits on all of those projects. But we really want this to transform the market so that becomes the norm moving forward. So I think there's so much work that can be done by, folks who want to get involved in this sector to really think about like, okay, like how do we make this effective now? And how do we make this transformational and able to be continued even without these incentives in the future? It's a big challenge and something that, I think is so important in order to really ensure we have an equitable transition that is continuous moving forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. I wanted to leave a few minutes at the end for any audience Q&A. I don't know if we have any questions online. Is there anybody in the room? Might have some questions. Yeah, let's go in the back and then up front. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Ariel and Jamal?
Yeah,
Yes.
how you doing?
I have a question about how is currently the adoption rate for these programs, the incentive programs, the home solar or maybe home battery? Do you see a communication and education is a challenge for you? And how is the strategy to tackle this issue?
Mhm.
The first question was about the adoption rate. Is that
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're brand new, so I think the rate right now is probably pretty low because all of the incentives haven't been deployed in earnest yet. The second question I think was around education and how we're tackling that.
Yes.
Got it. Well, I will say, and just from outside of the government, we are keen to make sure that people are aware of what's available to them. And so one of the tools that we've developed is a calculator. It's
I love the calculator. It's great.
thanks. Yeah, a lot of my colleagues have worked really hard on it. It is a tool that tells the user how much money they can save upfront on when they choose to invest in a energy efficient technology like a heat pump. So Ariel mentioned there are federal rebates that will be hitting the streets pretty soon. But a lot of states have state and local incentives too for these same types of technologies. So let's say a heat pump is $15,000 in X state. They can get a qualifying consumer can get up to $8,000 off the top from the federal rebate. And let's just say the utility has a $3,000 rebate. So 8,000 plus 3,000 is 11,000. See, got my math right that time. That means that the remaining cost is about 4,000. So it's lowering the cost, recognizing that the most energy burdened households probably can't afford to pay $15,000. Now they probably can't afford to pay $4,000 either. So we'll have to think more about how we're lowering that cost. But the tool that we've developed at least creates some transparency around like, here's what you could get and give people the power to make those decisions themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll add, similarly, a lot of these programs are pretty new. From the solar side, I think community solar currently is about, oh my gosh, like 2% of all of the solar developed currently. A lot of the solar currently is utility scale and there's not a lot of distributed solar out there overall. Something that we're thinking about in the solar office is how we can better communicate and educate households about the benefits of solar, as well as create a stronger consumer protection like market for solar as well. I think, historically, programs in different states operate very differently and have different consumer protections in place, require different savings levels, have different terms for contracts, and it can be very hard to understand. I even have trouble understanding, like if I were to get solar where I currently live, what would that look like, right? Amongst all of these different options and models. So we're really thinking about how can we better, make solar more transparent, help folks understand the benefits and be protected if they sign up for a solar contract, to make sure that, folks will only be better off if they're accessing solar energy, which is, the major goal that we have. So we're working on some different education campaigns for that. And I think a lot of that will also happen at the state level with the Solar for All programs. States have received, up to like $150 million, varying levels depending on the size of their program to expand low-income rooftop and community solar development. And part of that is going to be getting folks to sign up, trust the program, understand the benefits they're receiving. I think there's a lot of work that will need to be done at the state level and the federal level on that topic.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just add one more thing, which is the importance of community-based organizations who are based in community and rooted in community, who are providing different layers of support to their communities, whether that's through food drives or rental assistance, utility bill assistance. These anchoring institutions and communities are really important, and they're oftentimes nonprofit community-based organizations. And what the administration has done, I think, is really good, is they've invested a lot of money through the EPA to build capacity amongst these community-based organizations to do more of what they're doing, and also to be tapped to help to coordinate a lot of the climate and energy money that's flowing or will be flowing to their communities.
So I think our Zoom might cut us off soon. Is it?
Maybe we can get some contact information.
Yeah, that would be
You
perfect.
wanna follow up?
Yeah, so yeah, I think our Zoom's about to cut us off. So thank you both so much for joining us today. We had a great time, great conversation. I hope everyone in the room learned something new. I feel like, I'm feeling motivated to go out there and continue working on these programs. So if you all are comfortable sharing your contact information, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Maybe can give it to Jen and she can share it out.
Shared a whole bunch of resources in the
Perfect.
chat, so I'll make sure I send that to anybody who RSVP'd.
Awesome. Well, thank you both very much. Have a good rest of your day. And thank you to everyone for coming in person.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Did any of you